Hello and welcome to NC Continental Prime, reaching you live from our studios in Lagos, Nigeria. I am Genga Aborowa, and these are the headlines at this hour. The Nigerian government freezes accounts of Africa's largest entertainment group, MultiChoice, over tax fraud allegations. South Sudan bans independence anniversary parties. And Tanzania to conduct a national census exercise in August 2022. We'll bring you the details shortly. NC Continental Prime begins in the south of the continent, where there have been mixed reactions emanating from South Africa following the incarceration of former President Jacob Zuma last night. Zuma has begun a 15-month contempt of court sentence after handing himself over late last night following a ruling by the Constitutional Court. Political parties have welcomed the arrest, while Zuma's party, the African National Congress, wished Zuma well. Earlier today, South Africa's Justice Minister Ronald Lamola said the former president would serve less than 4 months in jail before being eligible for parole. He said Zuma would spend 2 weeks in isolation, where his health would be assessed. Joining us now is the political analyst Sanusha Naidu to help us unpack this day. Hello, Sanusha. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Hi. Thank you for having me on the show again.
Thank you for joining us on NC Continental Prime. Now, Sanusha, it's been quite a historical moment for South Africa. Opposition political parties welcoming the move, the ANC rather subdued, and the Zuma Foundation up in arms. So what does this moment mean for South Africa? Is it a turning point for the country?
I think it's a very significant moment for us. I mean, both in terms of the democracy, but I think also in the context of the rule of law and the Constitution. At the end of the day, the Constitution, the rule of law had prevailed. I think in the last several days and on the weekend, what we saw was a serious resistance by the former President Zuma to the idea that he would have to serve a 15-month sentence in terms of his contempt of court. Now, that judgment that was read out last week by a majority judgment, I should say, that was read out last week by Justice Kampepe, has indicated that, there was a very scathing judgment. It was a very hard-hitting judgment against the character of Mr. Zuma as well. And I think the resistance to that was essentially that, he's an individual that played a critical role in the liberation struggle within the ANC, and therefore there was this whole reaction and a backlash against the idea that someone of that caliber would actually be asked to do and serve a sentence which some analysts and some people in the mainstream media and in commentators have argued is an offense that's small, but the punitive action taken by the Constitutional Court was rather quite surprising, because it's 15 months for a contempt of court order, and that normally comes with a sanction of maybe 30 days or even a suspended sentence, which in this case is unsuspended, and of course with some kind of a financial penalty to pay. So I think the situation right now in South Africa was whether or not the reaction by Mr. Jacob Zuma, his supporters and his faction would actually essentially destabilize the country. There was a lot of war talk happening. There was a lot of images of instability, civil strife, and so forth. And so over the weekend, a number of violations took place outside the residence of Mr. Zuma, notwithstanding the fact that we are in lockdown 4 measures because of the pandemic, and we're in the third wave of the pandemic, and those violations had actually occurred outside the residence and in the home, around the home of Mr. Jacob Zuma, with thousands, well, not thousands, but hundreds of supporters, almost coming to 1,000 around and there. And I think to put it into context as well, the idea is that this is not necessarily should be seen as a victory for either side. I mean, I think it's a very difficult time as well that we end up in a situation where something that could have been avoided was not avoided. And so what we saw last night with Mr. Jacob Zuma being taken away to being driven to the correctional services facility not far from his home in northern KwaZulu-Natal is indicative of the fact that we should never have come to this point. Yes, it is a very important point, important feature, or historical moment or epoch in our country, but it's also something that we should never have been able to see because it was the rule of law. It should have been respected, and there are divisions around whether or not a man of 79 years of age should be seen being taken away in that way. At the same time, I think there are those that are saying that we can't afford to have this double standard within this space.
But I mean, the essence of it is that there are consequences for actions. Now, talking about former President Zuma's supporters, compared to Sunday when the Zuma supporters were quite brazen and vocal, the execution of this order seemed to have somewhat tamed Zuma's supporters quite significantly. How do you interpret their silence?
Well, I think the weekend essentially was the time in which the Jacob Zuma construct, or the Jacob Zuma base, so to speak, had come out to show their support. It was the weekend. People were basically being told that this is your leader. He's being incarcerated, or he's been taken to jail. There was a confusion as well, I think, among supporters of Jacob Zuma, as well as trying to create a spectacle around this issue. I mean, at one point, if you looked at the atmosphere at that outside the home of Jacob Zuma over the weekend, you got a sense it was jovial. You also got a sense that there were only pockets of what could be termed as intensity and so forth. I think the mutedness of this whole thing in terms of what happened yesterday, because we were also waiting to see whether the judgment in the application that Mr. Zuma's legal team made to the Pietermaritzburg High Court, whether there would have been a judgment made there in order to keep or to stay the execution arrest order by the Constitutional Court. That was only going to be decided on tomorrow. So I think at that point, there was also the onus on the security forces, the police, to decide whether, Mr. Zuma did not necessarily abide by the constitutional order that was written, the committal order that was written by Justice Kampepe. And at the same time, it was to see whether he would do that and he would basically present himself to the police and to the correctional facility. At the end of the day, there was also the onus on the police sector to decide what are they going to do, and there were complications there as well. I think what happened is that it was a working day. It was also the idea that people were not given, I don't think they had the ability to mobilize them in that context. And what you saw was that the police had basically moved in very fast. They set up their roadblocks. They kind of had a very, very deep presence in the region as well. And I think, when you think about this, again, the challenge we have to worry about is what was the optics that was presented to us on the weekend versus the optics that we saw last night. A very scant, a very, very small lot of people, not even a handful of people that were just around there protesting, including Mr. Jacob Zuma's son, Edward Zuma.
Now, Sanusha, tomorrow is a very important day in the Republic of South Africa. All eyes will be on two court proceedings. The first one is the Pietermaritzburg High Court delivers its judgment in the application that former President Zuma made earlier this week to the stay of execution order. So two separate cases. Also, throwing it forward, tomorrow we'll see the courts deliver judgment on ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule asking to set aside his suspension. What do you think we can expect in the two cases? And Okay.
I'm not a legal expert, so I cannot be completely in terms of what I think is just my personal impression and just a very ordinary interpretation of the law. For the first case, Mr. Zuma's case to the Pietermaritzburg High Court to stay the execution of arrest based on what the Constitutional Court had what was the majority judgment in the Constitutional Court. I think that's going to be a difficult one to see. We've heard arguments on Tuesday. We heard Mr. Jacob Zuma's legal team argue about, the questions around whether this was possible. Can it be done? Should the Constitutional Court have done this in the way that it did? But we never got the sense from listening to the arguments by the legal team of Mr. Jacob Zuma. You never got the sense that they were hitting home the real legal argument. And I think that for the other two legal counsel representing the Commission of Inquiry, the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, and of course the other one being the Friends of the Court. I think it is. One of these civil society groups. At the end of the day, they made much more, in my opinion, and I could be completely wrong, a more compelling argument. So the challenge now for Mr. Jacob Zuma in that application is whether or not the High Court believes it has jurisdiction and the power to overturn a decision by the apex court of the land, and that's the Constitutional Court, because there's no higher appeal. So this is not necessarily appealing a decision. This is actually asking a lower court to make a decision on a judgment by a higher court. And I can't see whether or not the High Court in Pietermaritzburg tomorrow will want to stray into that space, particularly convoluting the role of
it will be throwing up a lot of constitutional challenges and all of that. But we'll wait to see what happens tomorrow. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Sanusha Naidu. Thanks for joining us on NC Continental Prime.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Sanusha Naidu there from the Republic of South Africa, public affairs analyst. And out to the east of the continent, Tanzania will conduct the population and housing census in the month of August next year. President Samia Suluhu Hassan made the announcement on Thursday as she participated in the General Assembly of the Christian Community in Kilakala, Morogoro region. Data collected from the count will help the government to obtain the basic information needed to implement the Development Vision 2025 initiative, as well as other health and social reforms. Tanzania will digitally collect data using tablets instead of papers that were used in previous exercises. The census is expected to cost at least 328 billion Tanzanian shillings. That's about a little over $141 million. Still in the region, United Nations resident and humanitarian coordinator for Somalia, Adem Abdelmula, says the cost of inaction in the country is too high, adding that the humanitarian crisis there has escalated in recent years. Abdelmula says Somalia is home to one of the world's most complex humanitarian crises, with nearly half the population requiring life-saving or protection assistance. The UN coordinator says 2.8 million people are projected to face high levels of food insecurity and hunger by the end of the year. In the lead up to celebrations of the 10th anniversary of South Sudan's independence, the United Nations mission in South Sudan organized a two-day roundtable discussion with eminent leaders, intellectuals, politicians and young people in the country's capital, Juba, spearheaded by the Peacekeeping Mission's Political Affairs Division. The aim of the dialogue was for the leaders of today to be inspired by the courage, resilience, and sacrifice of South Sudanese communities. This is also to take stock of efforts towards nation building, as well as draw upon lessons learned, eschew violence, and look forward to build a durable peace across this young nation.
Greatness of a state is not determined primarily by its territory, population size, or natural resources, but by the sacrifice, hard work, wisdom, and patience of its people. Such is also the case here in South Sudan. The young nation's journey since independence has witnessed triumphs and travails, as well as progress and setbacks. AMIS will continue supporting South Sudan in its efforts to promote peace and security and bring to its people the much expected dividends of peace and independence, especially in relation to challenges in humanitarian assistance, recovery, and development.
Moving on to Central Africa, head of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO, Bintu Keita, has called on the heads of the institutions, political groups and civil society officials concerned to work together to reassure the country about the credible and independent organization of the 2023 electoral process. The mission's chief also stressed the need to organize inclusive and peaceful elections, while taking care of the potentially dangerous consequences of a divisive debate and nationality. She says the mission continues to implement a holistic strategy to address security challenges in the East, which includes the maintenance of a robust posture to counter threats to the civilian population.
J'encourage les responsables des institutions, formations politiques et responsables de la société civile concernée à travailler ensemble pour rassurer le pays sur l'organisation crédible et indépendante du processus électoral de 2023. Je souligne également la nécessité d'organiser des élections inclusives et apaisées en prenant garde aux conséquences potentiellement dangereuses d'un débat clivant sur la nationalité. C'est ainsi que l'encouragement à la pleine mise en œuvre du plan d'action du gouvernement est l'objet actuel de mes bons offices. Military means alone cannot provide lasting solutions. Without the restoration of state authority, including...
You're watching NC Continental Prime. Coming up on the news, Nigerian health stakeholders want the federal government to declare a state of emergency over the shortage of healthcare across the country. We'll bring you details of this and more after the break. You stay with us. You're welcome back now. Health stakeholders in Nigeria have called on the federal government to declare a state of emergency over the shortage of healthcare workforce across the country. They say Nigeria currently has 4 times below the approved ratio of doctors to patients required by the World Health Organization. News Central correspondent Edung Joseph reports.
With about 200 million in population, many believe Nigeria has a shortfall in the number of available healthcare professionals. While the World Health Organization pegs acceptable doctor-patient ratio as 1 doctor to about 600 persons and 16 nurses or midwives to about 10,000 persons, Nigeria currently has a doctor-patient ratio of 1 doctor to about 2,500 persons. This, according to health stakeholders, is a major source of worry as they call for a state of emergency in Nigeria's health sector.
It is estimated that Nigeria will approximately need about 149,000 doctors and about 471 nurses by 2030. Only 99,000 doctors and 333,000 nurses will be available based on the current growth rate.
Some healthcare professionals believe Nigeria is experiencing a brain drain as its healthcare professionals are seeking better wages and better working conditions outside the country. One of such professionals, the executive director of Project Pink Blue Initiative, supports this claim, saying 9 out of 10 qualified doctors are seeking for opportunities to immigrate out of Nigeria.
This migration of Nigerian physicians, Nigerian health workers abroad, impacts on Nigeria in diverse ways. For instance, the mortality cost of Nigerian physicians' migration to abroad total about 3.1 billion annually.
They say this is affecting the treatment and management of ailments such as cancer, as there is a need for all hands to be on deck to manage those affected.
The depreciating state of our health facilities, late presentation to the hospital, limited access to quality health care in Nigeria, unequal and or outright poor distribution of oncologists, the cancer specialists, high cost of cancer therapies, limited access to funds for treatment, and limited training for our oncology professionals are some of the biggest reasons we still have poor cancer outcomes in Nigeria.
This year, Project Pink Blue, with support from Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation, is launching the 2021 Upgrade Oncology, which primarily focuses on the training of oncology pharmacists, cancer doctors, and cancer nurses.
This Upgrade Oncology Pharmacy training is an important and much needed intervention in Nigeria.
A representative from Nigeria's Ministry of Health, however, assured that there is no cause for alarm. Dr. Uche Nwoku says government is committed to tackling challenges affecting the nation's health sector, including the funding of cancer treatments.
That cancer fund will be launched, and poor indigent patients in this country will have access to free treatment, comprehensive treatment covering chemotherapy, surgery, and radiotherapy by government. Okay, so that will be for indigent patients, and then we're going to pilot it in 6 hospitals across the country, and as the fund expands, more hospitals will also be part of it.
From Abuja, Idong Joseph, News Central TV.
The government of South Sudan has ordered the population to celebrate the 10th anniversary of its independence in private, officially because of COVID-19. The country, which came into existence on the 9th of July 2011, before plunging into a bloody civil war between 2013 and 2018, has not held a ceremony for the occasion since 2014, according to Deputy Information Minister Abba Meden. The South Sudanese ministers have expressed concerns about holding possible events in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, moving to neighboring Uganda, the government has been distributing COVID relief money to people affected by the second lockdown. About 500,000 people living in urban areas will benefit from the 53.7 billion Ugandan shillings, about $50 million set aside for the exercise. The money will be distributed through mobile money services, with each beneficiary expected to receive $29. The beneficiaries will include slum dwellers, food vendors, waiters, club bouncers, restaurant workers, musicians, comedians, taxi drivers, single mothers, teachers, and support staff in private schools, as well as those in government schools who are not on the payroll. And in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe's health ministry has recorded 2,264 new COVID-19 infections, the highest figures since the start of the pandemic in March 2020. This brings the total number of confirmed cases to over 60,000. 34 deaths were also recorded on the same day, bringing the number of deaths to 1,973. Zimbabwe is currently scaling up its vaccination program to ensure the targeted herd immunity of 10 million people is achieved by the end of this year. The health ministry says over 819,000 people have been vaccinated. Zimbabwe is on an inoculation drive, mainly with Sinopharm and Sinovac vaccines from China. Still in the region, charity organization Save the Children has expressed concern over the increase in COVID-19 cases amongst children in Mozambique. The NGO's advocacy manager, Jaime Chavite, says the number of cases for children under the age of 14 tripled in the past 3 days. Chavite adds that the daily infections have also risen from an average of 20 to over 50 in the past 3 weeks, and on Tuesday, 126 cases of infections were recorded in children. He has urged Mozambicans to cancel celebrations involving children and follow strict preventive measures in primary schools. The Southern African country, recorded 1,458 positive cases of COVID-19 and 11 deaths on Tuesday, its highest number since the outbreak of the pandemic. You're watching NC Continental Prime. When NC Continental Prime returns, we'll tell you why the World Health Organization says the world is at a perilous time. Join us again. Now, in a world draft, the World Health Organization Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the world is at a perilous point in this pandemic and has just passed the tragic milestone of 4 million recorded COVID-19 deaths, which likely underestimates the overall toll. Meanwhile, the WHO's Mike Ryan has warned governments to be really careful at this moment not to lose the gains made and be careful as they relax restrictions to open up very carefully.
The world is at perilous point in this pandemic. We have just passed the tragic milestone of 4 million recorded COVID-19 deaths, which likely underestimates the overall toll. Some countries with high vaccination coverage are now planning to roll out booster shots in the coming months and are dropping public health social measures and relaxing as though the pandemic is already over. However, compounded by fast-moving variants and shocking inequity in vaccination,
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse, calling on all Haitians to preserve the constitutional order, remain united in the face of this abhorrent act and reject all forms of violence. In a message read by spokesperson Stefan Dujarric, the Secretary General says the perpetrators of this crime must be brought to justice. He also stressed that the United Nations will continue to stand with the government and the people of Haiti.
Violence. The Secretary General condemned in the strongest terms the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse of Haiti. The perpetrators of this crime must be brought to justice. The Secretary General extends his deepest condolences to the people and government of Haiti and the family of the late president. The Secretary General calls on all Haitians to preserve the constitutional order, remain united in the face of this abhorrent act, and reject all violence. The United Nations will continue to stand with the government and people of Haiti.
The Nigerian government has frozen the accounts of Africa's largest entertainment group, MultiChoice, citing tax fraud and a lack of transparency about the number of its subscribers and income. The country's tax office wants to recover up to $4.4 billion. It says even though 34% of the group's total revenue comes from Nigeria, MultiChoice, which is based in South Africa, has refused to grant it access to its servers to allow officials to carry out an audit, according to the head of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mohammed Nami. In response, MultiChoice said that while it had not received any notification from FIRS, it respects and is comfortable that it complies with the tax laws of Nigeria. Now, joining us live this evening on NC Continental Prime to discuss this development is partner Tax Regulatory and People Services at KPMG, Wale Ajayi, joins us to discuss the significance of this latest move. Good evening, Mr. Ajayi.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, what are your thoughts on this latest development by the regulatory body, the Federal Inland Revenue Service?
Well, it's not strange. It's something that we've witnessed before. But I think what has to be established is that FIRS needs to establish first that MultiChoice is owing the amount that is alleged. It's not sufficient for them to make an allegation that the amount is being owed. They need to be able to prove that the amount is being owed and that the assessment that must have been issued in respect of the alleged outstanding liability has become final and conclusive. So there are checks and balances that are within the law that are meant to ensure that there is equity and there's fairness on the part of the taxpayer and also on the part of the FIRS.
Now, would I be wrong to ask why this may be coming at this time? I mean, companies are meant to audit their accounts and pay their taxes year on year. Why was it allowed to accumulate up to $4.4 billion in debt before anything of this nature was raised?
Okay, so let me just kind of give a bit of a background. Yes, you're right to say that companies are meant to prepare their tax returns every year within 6 months of the year end. So what typically happens is that companies will determine the amount that is being owed and pay the amount to the tax authorities. But it's also the tax authority, the tax law also requires or empowers the tax authorities to review the returns that have been submitted by taxpayers just to ensure that the returns are correct. So what I suspect has happened is that MultiChoice has been preparing and submitting its tax returns, and the FRS wants to conduct an audit just to satisfy itself that the returns being submitted by MultiChoice represent the true state of affairs. But from the stories that we've heard, I mean, we can't establish the fact just based on what is in the papers, is that the FRS has not been able to conduct that audit because the MultiChoice has not given it access, to the records and the information required, to make that determination. So that is what has happened here. It's not that MultiChoice has not been preparing and submitting returns, but they've not allowed, at least based on the allegation by FRS,
the content of the returns they've been given. Now, before I let you go, what are the implications for this on foreign direct investment and the business environment in Nigeria? As we do know, MultiChoice has huge holdings in the country. They're a huge employer of labor, and tax generated from MultiChoice is quite, it's a symbiotic relationship for both the Nigerian government and MultiChoice South Africa. What are the implications?
I think it's very important for us to understand that the due process has to be followed, both on the part of FRS and MultiChoice, right? So, I mean, in every country, there are laws to be followed. So if you have a company operating within the shores of Nigeria, then they need to follow the process, the due process in Nigeria. But again, the law also gives MultiChoice the ability, to contest the allegation that has been made, by the FRS. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as FRS follows the due process, right, and then there shouldn't be any problem. Interestingly, if I can just quickly add, just beginning of June this year, the Federal High Court issues what is called a practice direction that specifies the process to be followed, when these things happen. If FRS wants to, ask courts, the banks, to strain the bank account of defaulting taxpayers, there are processes to be followed. First and foremost is that there has to be an affidavit, right? An expert motion that they must submit to the court and show that the taxpayer is actually owing the amount that is been alleged. So, like I said, it's not sufficient for you to say
it's not arbitrary. They can't take arbitrary decisions.
They cannot make. They have to prove. They have to be able to prove and justify that. Well, they've issued the assessment, and MultiChoice did not respond as and when due to the assessment. But there is they can go to court to recover. There is a court process that MultiChoice can actually follow to recover and lift the lien, if there is any.
We'll certainly be watching developments in this latest round of events between MultiChoice South Africa and Nigeria's Federal Inland Revenue Service. Wale Ajayi, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening on NC Continental Prime. We do appreciate your insights on the subject.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Now, News Central's Tolulope Adeleru Balogun is standing by for the rest of business stories.
This is Business on NC Continental Prime. I'm Tolulope Adeleru Balogun. Nigeria has announced that it will set a crude oil benchmark price of $57 per barrel at an expected 1.88 million barrels a day for its 2022 budget. The country's finance minister, Zainab Ahmed, disclosed this amid rising oil prices. The minister added that the new crude benchmark would lift Nigeria's current oil production from 1.47 million barrels per day to 1.88 million barrels per day as the global economy reopens for business. This reopening has seen crude oil prices rise to their highest since 2018. Nigeria relies on oil exports for more than half its budget and 95% of foreign exchange. The minister noted that the FG's spending could rise by 3% to 13.98 trillion naira. And staying in Nigeria, electricity power generation companies say that the country's available capacity had dropped by about 3,000 megawatts. The executive secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies, Dr. Joy Ogaji, said capacity plunged from around 9,000 megawatts to 6,000 megawatts, adding that not all of the current capacity was being utilized. Figures obtained from the Federal Ministry of Power show that the highest quantum of power that was utilized in Nigeria as of July 6, 2021 was 4,370.7 megawatts. The Transmission Company of Nigeria, the firm that transmits power from generation companies to distribution firms, has on several occasions raised dust because distributors were rejecting electricity. And now moving to the eastern parts of the continent, Ethiopia is trying a new method of handling debt. The country is in the process of restructuring an additional $1 billion of debt as it seeks to free up funds to support its economic recovery amid the global COVID-19 pandemic. However, the plan to restructure does not include Eurobonds. According to the Finance Ministry, restructuring the debt will provide a grace period of 6 years and extend the maturity by 10 years. Already $2.5 billion in principal and interest payments has been postponed for 5 years by commercial creditors under the first external debt restructuring scheme. The announcement comes after Ethiopia in January this year requested to rework its debt under the Group of 20 Common Framework, an initiative to secure debt relief for poor nations from all creditors, including China and commercial lenders. Now here's some more business news from here around the eastern part of the continent. A new rail project in Kenya faces further delays after the country failed to ink a 16 billion Kenyan shillings financial deal with France. The project entails constructing a railway linking Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to Nairobi's city center and constructing a 5-kilometer meter gauge line connecting the airport to standard gauge rail terminus elsewhere. This means that the rail project, whose construction was initially set for August following a deal agreed between French President Emmanuel Macron and President Uhuru Kenyatta in March 2019, faces further delays. In addition to the rail project, the loan is also meant to aid the revamping of the old 17-kilometer railway track, construction of 2 airport stations, a terminal at Donholm, and an automatic fare collection system. Moving away from East Africa now, South Africa's liquidity position remains stable beyond June as the country's gross reserves increased marginally, though gold reserves slipped. The South Africa Reserve Bank said that the country's gross reserves ticked up 0.6% to $54.47 billion. That's about 778 billion rand in June from $51.14 billion in May. The bank said the gross reserves were boosted by a rise in foreign exchange reserves from $43.88 billion to $44.82 billion due to proceeds received from foreign borrowings from the New Development Bank. And that's all the business we have for you on NC Continental Prime. There is more news coming up, so stay with us. I'm Tolulokwe Adileru Balogun. I'll see you at 11 a.m. West African time for Business Edge.
Now on Jamiangu tonight, we take you to the Republic of South Africa, where hydroponic farming has taken center stage in some communities.
It's the economic hub of Johannesburg, Sandton, a sprawling concrete jungle. But on one of its many rooftops, one finds an unassuming building. It's a haven of fresh produce being grown as part of a rooftop farm run by Zandile Khumalo.
Here at Neighbor Roots, our aim and angle is to make the concrete jungle here in the city green.
What makes the rooftop farm unique is that it uses a hydroponic system to grow the produce.
So a hydroponic system is that you're irrigating nutrient solution water through into your crops where the crops will absorb the nutrients using their roots so that they can be able to grow up to its optimum best. When it comes to hydroponics, everything is being soluble and then it is transported with using profile irrigation pipes and profiles to the roots where then the roots can absorb it directly. So they don't go searching for the nutrients, we feed them directly within the roots. So that's quite the difference when it comes to us in open field farming, and that we are able to control the conditions to create an optimum best condition for that crop to grow.
Kaelo Morake helps to monitor the crops and creates trusses to ensure that the produce is not crowded. Although he started in conventional farming, he has since realized that hydroponics is faster and cleaner.
The benefits of hydroponic farming is that you can have better yield. The nutritional taste of your produce is much more better than open field farming, and also that you can be able to irrigate much more better, that the irrigation system where we recirculate our water, there's no wastage in water. You can be able to use solar systems, which then lowers down your energy consumption in terms of farming, and there are no chemicals that we use on our produce, helping us not to harm the environment and helping us not to harm the people who consume our produce. So it was an idea that we wanted to be able to bring into our community, to bring fresh produce closer to the market, and also how best can we grow can we grow our vegetables for the clients that we have. So the value chain that we have is that we supply our produce straight into the shopping center. We supply it to restaurants like Signature, the Pomodoro, and the green peppercorn. The type of produce we have at this current moment is baby spinach, of which we grow it on the grow beds. We have some tomatoes, your cherry tomatoes, your large tomatoes, and we've got some green peppers. We have some herbs from basil, and we are looking into opening, and we also have some lettuce, some different types of lettuce, your fancy lettuce, your butter lettuce, and your oaks.
With regular and frequent yields, Zandile has no problem supplying the local restaurants in the mall.
It's been almost, about 6 or 7 months that we've been lucky enough to get very fresh produce that's been farmed upstairs. I understand it's hydroponic and it's organic, so obviously we're very happy about the organic part of it. But the other conveniences are the fact that it's always fresh. We get deliveries almost every day, so our lettuces and basil and the stuff we buy is very, very fresh. And it's very convenient because we receive it every day, so it's really nice, it's convenient. And on top of the fact that we are supporting local farmers and very talented people who are doing things in a very different way, which I think in a city like Johannesburg is important because, it's a green city, so the fact that we can farm in the middle of the city is actually quite nice.
The Neighbor Roots project also sells its produce at a Saturday market. Zandile has plans to teach farming classes to the Santon community to help those who live here learn how to use hydroponics.
An initiative like this, who would ever think of putting food on the top of growing food on the top of a shopping center? So to have something like this for the next coming generation, I think it's a good initiative.
For Khumalo and Morake, this farm is just the beginning. They hope to expand to other rooftops across the city. For Jamiangu, Diane Hawker, News Central Television.
Now, for the latest sporting news on the continent and more, Udoka Njoku is standing by for the sports news.
Well, looking at the world of sports now, President Uhuru Kenyatta on Thursday actually bid farewell to Team Kenya athletes who will compete in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and urged them to compete effectively and fairly. Now, the president who hosted the team at State House, Nairobi, also launched Team Kenya's new Nike kit just minutes before the first batch of athletes and officials left for a pre-Olympics training camp in Kurume City in Japan. Now, looking at other sports news that we have for you, starting off with the cricket now. Namibia recently achieved another milestone when it won 2 more medals at the ICC Development Awards. After winning the Associate Member Men's Performance of the Year for 2019, Namibia won the Africa Regional winners in both the ICC Development Initiative of the Year and the ICC Digital Fan Engagement of the Year categories. Now, Chairman of the ICC Associate Members, Imran Kwata, said that utilizing the lockdown to embark upon an intensive capacity building program demonstrates an exceptional use of the time from playing cricket. Cricket Namibia CEO Johan Muller said they were proud to win the ICC awards. Moving over to football now, European football governing body UEFA opened the disciplinary proceedings and charged England over the fans' behavior during their Euro 2020 semi-final victory over Denmark, including allegations a laser was pointed at goalkeeper Kasper Schmeichel's face. Photos showed the green light of a laser being pointed at Schmeichel's face just before Hurricanes' extra-time penalty. Some supporters at Wembley also booed during Denmark's national anthem. UEFA said it had charged England for use of laser pointer, disturbance caused during the national anthem, and lighting of fireworks by their fans. England will face Italy in Sunday's final at Wembley. Moving over to boxing now, Tyson Fury's trilogy fight with Deontay Wilder is in danger of being postponed following an outbreak of COVID-19 in his training camp. The WC King is set to defend his title against the Bronze Bomber a fortnight on Sunday in Las Vegas, but a string of positive tests for Team Fury have threatened to delay the pair's Sin City showdown. The third installment of Wilder vs. Fury could end up being delayed until September. It's currently unknown how many Team Fury members have tested positive for COVID, and the outbreak, however, is serious enough to force the potential postponement of the fight, but a decision on the rescheduling of the fight is yet to be made. And for the Olympics now, organizers of the Tokyo Olympics have agreed to hold the event without spectators. Now, Japan's Olympic Minister Tamayo Marukawa said the decision comes after Japan declared a state of emergency for the capital due to the global health crisis that will run throughout the event. The move was made following talks between the government, Tokyo Olympics, and Olympic officials.
For some athletes, that's going to help them raise their game because they won't feel the pressure of the fans, or it won't be a distraction. But for most top performers, it will feel strange, and it may actually make them a bit concerned that they may not deliver their best performances, because often the fans bring the atmosphere, bring the excitement, and help athletes to bring their best performances on the night.
All right, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshida Suga says the state of emergency was essential to stop Tokyo becoming the source of another wave of infections as the highly infectious Delta variant spreads. The ban on spectators has ended hopes for Tokyo organizers of adding a public spectacle to the event, which has already been delayed by a year. The medical experts welcomed the decision, having said for weeks that no fans would be the least risky option. And that's a wrap on Sports Update on NC Continental Prime. I am Udoka and Jock. We'll head back to Benga for the rest of the news.
Thank you very much, Udoka. Now in entertainment, Chidimang also standing by with all the entertainment stories that are trending at the moment.
Welcome to Entertainment News, where we bring you all happenings across the entertainment industry in Africa. Tonight on Entertainment, Wizkid announces Made in Lagos tour. Kennedy Akpon's message to Ghanaian ladies. The Sowetan, together with Netflix, celebrate the entertainment industry icons of the last 40 years. Learn martial arts to defend yourself, Stella Damascus advises women. We begin in Ghana, where central lawmaker Kennedy Akpoyong has called out on Ghanaian ladies. According to him, while their colleagues are using social media to market their businesses and making good money for themselves, some women are using the platforms to fight over men. Citing Rihanna as an example of someone who Ghanaian ladies should emulate, Kennedy Akpoyong said she invests time in marketing her design to the world, and it's fetching her a lot of money. He believes that a lot of cash can be made from social media, and the earlier the 21st century woman knows about this, the better they can make life for themselves. And moving on to South Africa, in celebration of its 40th anniversary, Sowetan and Netflix created a collaborative work recreating historical moments from the entertainment industry with some legends. The duo recreated some of South Africa's entertainment's iconic moments captured in the 80s and 90s. Seeing all those stars, some alive, some late, loudly expressive in wardrobe and their makeup, or even in their radness, surely this inspires artists in the present to be as fearless. Brenda Fassie, Yvonne Chaka Chaka, Johnny Clegg, jazz group Harare, and many more were honored for their contribution to South Africans' entertainment legacy. One cannot help but feel nostalgic as the sight of these photographs in black and white. This specific project was done to celebrate Soweto's 40th anniversary of sharing content with South Africa. This week, the Soweto's Netflix campaign draws to an end with a series of photographs highlighting the excellence and talent from South Africa's musicians, actors, and artists. Nigerian actress Stella Damascus has advised women to learn how to defend themselves from abusive men, as this will help curtail their excesses. The movie star made this known while reacting to the comments she got from some men after she shared a clip from a movie on her Instagram page.
What is she doing here? Babe, leave this to me.
In the clip, a woman walked into her husband cheating, and instead of the stereotype reaction of sobbing or denial, she attacked him with her martial skills.
Are you?
The actress slammed those who questioned her motive behind the release of the video. She went on to advise women who are experiencing domestic violence in their homes to learn martial arts to defend themselves from their abusive partners. Quite interesting. And finally, on entertainment, Grammy Award winner Wizkid has announced new North American tour set to kick off September 10 with a show at Opera Theater in Boston. The rest of the tour will take the Nigerian superstar through Brooklyn, Chicago, Atlanta, Toronto, and more. This also comes on the back of Wizkid's buzzing song Essence, featuring Thames. He's also set to tour UK and Europe soon. And that is an entertainment tonight. Until next time, I am Chidima Nwosu.
And now for updates on what to expect from the weather tomorrow. News Central's weather desk has you covered. And that's all at this hour. But before we go, let's remind you of the top stories at this hour. The Nigerian government has frozen accounts of Africa's largest entertainment group, MultiChoice, over tax fraud allegations. The South Sudan government has banned independence anniversary parties. And finally, we told you Tanzania will conduct national census exercise in August 2022. Now, remember to follow us on social media with News Central TV. You can download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. You can also watch News Central live and Star Times, Channel 274, Avo TV, Channel 23, Vision 247, Free TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Benga Aboroa.